a timeless, exquisite collection of short stories that's bound to leave you mesmerized and awestruck. Wow.
Very nice.
The compilation is a masterpiece. The selection of stories indicates a true literary master at work. And I give you Roland Allnach.
Well, thank you. Thanks for coming. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, or maybe don't know me as well as you think you know me, I thought I would talk a little bit about how I got into writing from childhood and progressed to the point where now I have these 3 books of which I am very proud and fortunately well received. I had a little bit of a different childhood than I think a lot of people I grew up with. My father came over from Germany when he was 18. My parents, well, my father was a mechanic, my mom was a teacher. Our dinner conversations were always abstract things. There was a lot of give and take of ideas. There was a lot of different cultural influences because my father came from another country. So he always had a little bit of a different viewpoint on things than we had from our, generic American upbringing. Later on in my childhood, my father got to work for an airline, and we were able, fortunately, to go over back and forth to see the family in Germany quite frequently, which was an incredible experience and something I'm very happy to have had because, again, I got to see and grow up seeing the world from a whole different cultural perspective. And I feel like that has given me so much in terms of having an open mind, being receptive to ideas that are maybe a little bit different than what I know, and at the least understanding that things may be different than what I know them to be, and to be respectful of that. So I try to have an open mind as much as I can. Which was a great thing because growing up in Kings Park is sort of an interesting place. We have the Kings Park Site Center right there. And if you have a little bit of a Gothic imagination like I do, boy, there's all sorts of room there for things to move in. And move in, they did. As you mentioned, I grew up originally doing a lot of artwork. I used to like to do a lot of sketches, pen and ink, some painting. And what I found was with my artwork that I was always trying to compose a bigger and bigger scene. And really what I was trying to do was tell a story. And finally I thought, why don't I just try to write a story and take that visual influence and put it into words. And I think that is something that has been a great aid, a great guide in all of these stories I've done, because my creative process is really visual. I start asking myself why on a certain idea or topic, and I keep following that till I get a certain point where I am now interested. And usually that is a visual impact. I let it go, take that image, and then my challenge is to put it into words on the page. And because I have such a vivid picture of it in my head, I like to roll a lot of descriptive language into what I do. A lot of my inspiration for writing I draw from classical literature, which may seem a little bit unusual because I'm writing science fiction, supernatural, paranormal, I do mainstream stuff, I do horror. I like to dip my writing pen into all sorts of different ink. But the thing I love about classical literature is because these things were written at a time where you did not have TV, you did not have all of our modern conveniences for entertainment, they had to be descriptive. And they had to be descriptive in ways that were once entertaining and illuminating to what they were writing. And I think that's why classics are stories that we keep with us today. This is why they have become classics. Because they not only show us a world we no longer experience because time has moved on, but they show us how people interacted in that world and what it meant to be human in that world. And there are many things about being human that I think are timeless. And whether it was back then or now, we can still understand things such as jealousy, love, hate, all those little tidbits that make us people in all of our messy and wonderful ways. And these are the kind of stories I like to write. So, aside from that, my main joy with writing is characterization. I really enjoy getting into my characters. And I have a few set philosophies when I write, and most of them involve characterization. Because one of the things I always tell myself is if it's not real for the character, it's not going to be real for the reader. If your character is not involved in your story, why should the reader be? So you have to bring, that's the portal for the reader into the story, is through your character. And again, going back to classical literature, whether it's mythology, Shakespeare, Kafka, Tolstoy, whichever way you want to go, they all have vivid character portraits. And they're done in all different ways, all different influences, because of their different times, but it's always there. And again, they're touching on these timeless parts of the human character that we still identify with. So these are the things I try to weave into what I write. Now, I have my 3 books here, as you can see. My first book, Remnant, was mostly science fiction, speculative, 3 novellas there. Bodies and Entities, I did 6 novellas, horror, supernatural, paranormal. And Prism is a little bit of a different nut, which I'll crack open in a moment. But the reason I bring up the different books is, again, one of the things I like to do is explore this idea of our life experience, what it means for people to try to find their place in the world. Because I think something everybody deals with, consciously, subconsciously, somewhere in between, is trying to make sense of your life and the world and your place in it. And I think one of the wonderful things you can do with genre fiction is take a strange situation or a surreal situation and really take that perspective and blow it up. Because now you're not just walking to a store, you're encountering something that you never expected. And when things come out of the blue, now you start asking questions. And certainly some of the characters I picked, they're fringe people, they're strange people. And again, it's because they have an altered perspective. They're not in the regular world we're in, they're on the outside looking in, trying to find a way perhaps to fit in, or find a way to justify not fitting in. And when something else comes in that makes it even more difficult, that question just becomes more pronounced. Which brings me now to Prism. So I have 17 stories here, and all different kinds of genres, as the review quotes said. It's many different things, but one of the things I always wanted to do once I started getting published was to have my short stories in a collection. And I didn't just put this collection together to have a page length, to have a book. One of the things I liked looking back at the stories I had published is they show how my writing voice matures, but they also develop these ideas that I really wanted to develop as a writer. And I think put together, they flow very well. And it really does take you places you may not expect. The other half of the book are things that I have not published before. And I put them with my published pieces because the idea was for the book to take people way out on an imaginative limb and then slowly reel you back in. And the new pieces, one of them is a Shakespearean-style tragedy, which I'm going to read a little bit of that. One of them is a piece of epic poetry, because I'm a big Homer fan. And the last one is a little short story that, when I read a little piece of it, perhaps it will illuminate itself a little more. But story I'd always wanted to publish, never could get published because I realized that even though it's its own story, it really belongs as a cap to something bigger. And that bigger piece of work became Prism.